When I took over, I think we were second from bottom. I mean, we were only 4 or 5 games into the season, so that can't happen. But I think as soon as I was left for Newcastle, I'd resigned and gone up the road. So it was still a difficult circumstance and a difficult situation because the club wasn't as prepared in terms of the managerial change. So I came in and I have to say the group of senior players at Blackburn at that time, like Gary Flitcroft and good young players, the likes of Matt Jansen, and we had a good core that I felt comfortable with. We had an outstanding keeper in Brad Friedel as well. And I knew I had a group of players that I could work with. Their work ethic was exceptional. I worked them really, really hard, I have to say, in my first year. And a few of the older guys blamed me for finishing their careers a little bit sooner just because the training was so hard. But I felt that was important because I wanted my teams to be strong right at the end of games, and we certainly were that. So we got confidence, and we always felt if we were behind in games the last 20 minutes, we always felt that we had a real chance, because if we were within one goal of any team, that we always felt we had a chance to win. I think from my point of view, it was whenever I went up against United, it was I always wanted to do well. Only because I viewed Sir Alex as the best manager, and I wanted to test myself against the best. So whenever I went up against him, I didn't ask for any favours. He wasn't going to get any from me either. I was there to try and beat his team because I viewed them and him and himself as the manager as the best that was around, and I wanted to beat them. That was my attitude to it. That was never going to change. I think sometimes it was misinterpreted, maybe looking back. I think people thought, oh, he doesn't like United anymore, he's got an issue with Ferguson. It was never about that. It was always about the fact that I wanted to put myself up against what I viewed as the best club and the best manager at that time. And when you are able to overcome a club of that stature and a manager of that stature, then clearly that's going to resonate around football, and people might acknowledge that maybe that you're doing a good job. People made assumptions, and in my view, they were wrong. I think it all stemmed. It was from one game, if I'm honest. We played Chelsea at Ewood Park, and it was a great game. Unfortunately, I think it was Iron Robin got injured, missed-time tackle, and he got injured and had to go off. And it was a physical game. I mean, no bones about it. Chelsea could look after themselves in those days as well. So we matched them up. In the end, they beat us 1-0, I think. And I remember José going to the crowd and whipping everybody up in his grey flannel coat, if I recall. And even though we got beat at that time, I was actually proud of my players in terms of they matched Chelsea in that physicality, but in the game as well. Unfortunately, the headlines after it weren't great, and there was a lot of focus on the injury to Robin and how our approach led to the injury, and I thought that was unfair on the night. And unfortunately, people started throwing mud. Some of it sticks, and we took a long time to shake it all off. The decision to go to City wasn't shaped, in my view, because of my playing career. I didn't attach any relevance to that. In my view, I was a professional football manager, and I was going on to the next project or the next level of club that I needed to move on to. I looked at the situation. I looked at City. I felt they got a brand new stadium. They had apparently owners with lots of money, which wasn't the case when I actually got there. So I made a decision to go to City because I felt I was going from Blackburn, a very stable, well-run club, and Man City would be a step up and the next level, as it was. And when I found out when I actually got there, the reality wasn't that in terms of the level of standing of the club. Actually, Blackburn were in a better place than actually Man City were. They had better training ground. They were more stable. The ownership was better at that time. And those were all assumptions that I made wrong, because I felt maybe Man City would have been better in that regard. But I made the decision. I was there. I was going to make the best of it. And unfortunately, I think the Shinawatra era was clothed in a little bit of mystery and intrigue, and never really got to the bottom of why players had to be sold. And I think we had a situation with Vedran Korluka, who arguably was one of our better players at that time. He had to be sold because there wasn't no money. We made a good deal because there was a player I'd seen I wanted to sign for Blackburn, but we couldn't afford him, and that was Pablo Zabaleta. So we were able to bring him as a replacement for Korluka. So it was one of the better deals, but there was clearly a lot of turmoil, and obviously the club was taken over by Sheikh Mansour, and then overnight it just changed completely as a club. I think the reality was that I wasn't their guy, and you always know if there's a change of ownership that you might put off the stay of execution, but at some point they will make a change because you're just not their guy, and there was an acceptance of that. I tried to obviously make my tenure as long as I could. I felt there was a thinking in it as we went into the second year, which was their first full year as the new ownership. I always felt that there was that underlying feeling that maybe they were just waiting for the moment, and I've been told subsequently that I was probably very, very close on 3 occasions before I was actually sacked. So I did well to last probably as long as I did, because there was always that feeling, well, at some point they're going to make a change. Vinny was a player that, from the first time I saw him, I actually saw him on a pre-season tour of Germany. He was playing for Hamburg, and I was with Blackburn, and I thought, that's guy at the back. He was actually playing in midfield in those days, and he was just clearly big presence. He was directing people. He was telling where to go, what to do, and very clearly a leader of the men around him. And I thought, well, if I ever get a chance of getting in a room with him to sign him, he'd be one that I would want to sign, just because of that initial observation of him. But we had the opportunity to bring him to the club. It was actually before the change of ownership, and I got wind that he was available. His club were willing to look at letting him go. And Man City, if we're honest, they weren't an easy sell in those days. It's quite easy for Pep these days to say, all right, Man City want to sign the top players. But for a lot of the time, and certainly in the initial period when people didn't understand what the ownership were going to do with the club and how successful they were going to be, we were viewed as somewhat like interlopers, trying to gate-crash the party of the top clubs, because it was Man City. They weren't viewed as a top club in Europe, and we were flying out to try and buy all these top players and getting laughed out of town, if we're honest. But I sat down in front of Vinny and just explained what I felt the direction of the club was going to be. But very quickly he understood. I was trying to tell him this club's going places. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. I need players that are leaders. I needed players to manage that dressing room, and I'd seen him before. He acknowledged that. He was pleased that I wasn't just picking names out of a hat. I actually wanted him personally, and I think that was a start of a relationship that's continued. And he's an outstanding individual, notwithstanding his ability as a football player. So his manner and his behaviour and his standards, those are the ones that I wanted at the club. The circumstances of the game, I think everybody knows, is that City needed to win. We needed to obviously better or equal the results of Bolton, who were playing at Stoke, funny enough, at the same time. So we're in the game, and clearly we were thinking, well, it's the last throw of the dice for us. We'd done really well to get in that situation. And in the first place, if we're honest, we had a terrible run-in. We had games against Liverpool, Arsenal, and we'd beaten those clubs just to get ourselves into the position where we found ourselves, just with a chance of staying up. A lot of people didn't think it was much of a chance. It was more dependent on the result of the other game. But the game itself was quite bizarre. There were so many incidents in it. We were behind in the game from memory, and then we got back on. All of a sudden, news from the other game started coming through. Joey Barn gets sent off. We're down to 10 men. We got our noses in front. We're still leading with, 6 minutes to go, something daft. And then they made a couple of changes. I think Dzeko came on and made a difference. They got back on level terms. And I always remember at that point, we knew we were safe because the other result came in. So at that point, I wanted to make sure, because United were up the road, obviously waiting on the result again. I'm thinking, I wouldn't mind United winning if I'm honest. So I'm thinking, right, we've just conceded the second goal. It's 2-2. And I think it was Jay Bothroyd looks over, what do you want us to do? Because the players obviously understood that the game was over and we'd stayed up. And we were just saying, just kick it as far as you can, right in the corner, the game's over. So it was set back. Jay hit a long ball into the corner, didn't make it. Joe Hart, if you remember, run like a bat out of hell to keep the ball in. He kept it in, got it out of his feet, banged it forward, and all of a sudden people started falling over, missing tackles, gets to Aguero, and as you expect him in that situation, he scores a winning goal. It was, I have to say, of all the games I've been involved in, that noise at that moment when that goal went in is different to anything I ever heard, or heard before or since. It was just unbelievable sound. Different sound to a football crowd. I think it was a mixture of screaming and noise, and it was just an unbelievable moment.